The wind that swept down across the Texas Panhandle in the year 1878 did not care for treaties, nor did it recognize the fences that men like Elias Cooper were trying to drive into the hard, red earth. It was a hot, dry breath that smelled of sagebrush, horse sweat, and the metallic tang of drying blood. To the people in the Concho Valley, it felt like the end of something. To the man watching from the limestone ridge, it felt like a warning he had heard 1,000 times before. Noconi sat atop his paint horse, his body as still as the rock formations that jutted out from the canyon floor. At 30 years of age, he had seen the buffalo vanish like mist under the morning sun, leaving behind only bleaching bones and the empty belly of the prairie. He was a Nermernu, a person, what the white men called Comanche, and he was tired. He wore a simple buckskin shirt, worn thin at the elbows, but beneath it, crossing the expanse of his bronze chest, was a jagged ridge of scar tissue. It was a souvenir from a peace parley 5 years ago, a gift from a white captain who had smiled with his mouth while his hand signaled a hidden sniper. That scar did not let Noconi forget. It pulled tight when the weather turned cold, a constant reminder that words written on paper by Washington men were as substantial as smoke. His dark eyes narrowed as he looked down toward the valley floor. A patrol of blue coats was moving slowly west, their metal sabers glinting in the harsh sun. They were looking for his band. Noconi had barely 24 fighting men left. The rest were women and children, their bellies hollow, their eyes wide with a fear he could not hunt away. He wanted to hate them, all of them, for the disease and the whiskey and the starvation. But hate took energy, and Noconi needed every ounce of strength just to keep his people alive. He turned his horse, the animal responding to the slightest pressure of his knees, and vanished behind the ridge line, a ghost in a land that was rapidly deciding it no longer believed in ghosts. 5 miles to the south, the air in the parlor of the Cooper Ranch house was thick enough to choke a man. It smelled of stale tobacco smoke and desperation. Elias Cooper sat behind his heavy oak desk, his head in his hands. The ledger open before him told a grim story in red ink. The war between the states had ended more than a decade ago, but Elias was still fighting a losing battle against drought, rustlers, and the fluctuating price of beef. "It is a simple proposition, Elias," Major Harlan Briggs said, his voice smooth and heavy like molasses pouring from a jug. The major stood by the fireplace, though no fire burned in the hearth. He was a large man, broad in the shoulder, with a mustache that was carefully waxed and a uniform that was impeccably kept despite the dust of the frontier. He had been a Confederate officer once, and he carried that lost cause in the stiff way he held his neck. But he had adapted. Now, he wore the blue of the Union cavalry because that was where the power lay. "The railroad commissioners are coming through next month," Briggs continued, inspecting the tip of his cigar. "If we can guarantee the safety of the valley, the line will run through here. Your land value will triple overnight. You could pay off the bank in St. Louis and still have enough to buy 500 heads of prime breeding stock." Elias looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked older than his 50 years. "And to guarantee that safety, Major, what is the cost?" "We clear them out," Briggs said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming hard. "The Comanche, Noconi and his stragglers, they are a blight. Elias, as long as they roam these hills, no train will run, and no civilized family is safe. I have the authority to remove them, permanently. They are starving." "Harlan," Elias said weakly, "they are hardly a threat. They are savages," Briggs snapped, his veneer of civility cracking for a second. "And savages do not understand mercy. They only understand force." He walked over to the desk and placed a hand on the leather-bound book. "But that is my burden to bear. Yours is to secure your legacy. Think of your daughter. Think of Taya." At the mention of her name, Elias flinched. Briggs smiled, a slow spreading of lips that did not reach his cold, gray eyes. "She is 19, a flower blooming in a desert. She needs a husband who can protect her, who can provide for her, a man standing—" She is spirited, Elias murmured. She has her mother's fire. Fire needs a hearth to contain it, or it burns the house down, Briggs said. I am asking for her hand. Elias, you know my prospects. I will be governor of this territory one day. Taya would be the first lady of Texas, and you would be the father-in-law of the governor, with a railroad running through your backyard. Or you can let the bank take the ranch, and you and the girl can live in a boarding house in town. It was not a proposal. It was an ultimatum wrapped in silk. Elias Cooper looked at the man who wanted to buy his daughter with the blood of natives and the promise of steam engines. He felt a sickness in his gut, the shame of a man who knows he is about to sell his soul because he is too tired to hold on to it. I will speak to her, Elias whispered. Taya Cooper did not know she was being bartered like a prize heifer. She was 3 miles away, near the banks of the Conco River, doing the one thing that made her feel like she owned her own soul. She had tied her chestnut mare, Bess, to a scrub oak and was sitting on a flat rock, a sketchbook balanced on her knees. Taya was not the delicate beauty the town gossips painted her to be. Yes, she had hair the color of spun honey and eyes that held the blue of the deep sky. But her hands were calloused from holding reins, and beneath her riding skirt, she wore men's trousers because they made sense. She hated the town. She hated the way the women whispered behind their fans about which officer was single, and she hated the way the men looked at her, as if she were a glass doll to be put on a shelf and admired, but never heard. They called her a virgin, a good girl, a prize. They did not know that she carried a small Derringer pistol in the pocket of her dress, and that she could shoot the head off a rattlesnake at 20 paces. On the paper before her, charcoal lines were forming a shape. It was not a drawing of a flower or a landscape. Subjects deemed appropriate for a young lady. It was the profile of a warrior she had seen 2 weeks ago from a distance. He had been sitting on a ridge, silhouetted against the setting sun. There was a loneliness in his posture that had struck her, a noble kind of sorrow that she found nowhere in the boisterous, greedy men who filled her father's parlor. She shaded the line of the jaw, trying to capture the strength she had sensed. Her father called them devils. The major called them vermin. But Taya saw only men fighting for a home that was being stolen inch by inch. She knew it was dangerous to be out here alone. The stories of raids were not entirely fiction, though she suspected Major Briggs exaggerated them to frighten the town council into giving him more funding. Bess whinnied softly, her ears flicking back. Taya froze. She had grown up on the frontier. She knew that animals sensed the change in the air long before humans did. She closed her sketchbook slowly and reached into the folds of her skirt, her fingers closing around the cold ivory handle of the Derringer. The wind died down suddenly. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against her eardrums. Thwack! The sound was dull and wet. Taya gasped as an arrow slammed into the earth, not 3 feet from where she sat. It vibrated with the force of the impact, its feathers humming. It was not a shot to kill. It was a knock on the door. Taya scrambled to her feet, the pistol coming up, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She scanned the tree line, the brush, the rocks. Show yourself, she cried out, her voice shaking but defiant. Movement on the rise above her caught her eye. A horse stepped out from behind a cluster of boulders. The rider sat tall and loose, his chest bare, his hair black as a raven's wing falling over his shoulders. It was him, the man from her drawing. Nokoni looked down at the white woman. He had been tracking a deer when he saw her. He had watched her for 10 minutes. Puzzled. White women did not ride alone this far from the ranch. White women did not sit on rocks and make marks on paper. They stayed in their wooden boxes and screamed when they saw his kind. He saw the small gun in her hand. It looked like a toy, but Nokoni knew that even a toy could kill. He held his bow loosely. An arrow knocked but not drawn. His eyes locked with hers. Taya felt the air leave her lungs. Up close, he was terrifying. The war paint on his cheekbones was a stark crimson against his copper skin. The scar on his chest was a jagged line of violence, but it was his eyes that held her. They were not the eyes of a beast. They were intelligent, assessing, and fiercely human. They stared at each other across the 20 yards of dusty ground. The daughter of the man who claimed this land, and the son of the man who belonged to it. "Go back," Nokoni said. His English was broken, harsh, learned from trading posts and captives. "Not safe." Taya blinked, stunned that he spoke. "This is my father's land," she retorted, the words tumbling out before she could check them. Nokoni's lip curled slightly, not in a smile, but in a grimace of irony. "Land belongs to no one, but death walks here today." He began to turn his horse, dismissing her. Taya felt a strange surge of emotion, a mix of relief and insult. He was letting her go. He was not the monster Briggs described. Suddenly, Nokoni stopped. His head snapped toward a thicket of mesquite bushes to Taya's right, 50 yards away. His eyes went wide, not with fear, but with recognition. Taya saw the change in him. She thought he was about to draw his bow on her. She raised her pistol higher, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Stay back," she warned. But Nokoni was not looking at her. He was looking past her. From the mesquite bush, there was a metallic click, the sound of a hammer being pulled back on a heavy Sharps buffalo rifle. It was not a sound nature made. In the fraction of a second that followed, Taya realized two things. First, the sound had come from behind her. Second, the warrior on the hill was not the one threatening her. "Down!" Nokoni roared. It happened in a blur of motion that Taya's mind could barely track. Nokoni did not spur his horse away to safety. He did not fire an arrow at her. Instead, he kicked his paint horse into a violent lunge, not away from her, but straight down the slope toward her. The roar of the buffalo rifle shattered the afternoon peace. Crack, the heavy lead slug, meant to tear through the chest of the Comanche leader, whined through the air. But Nokoni had moved. As his horse thundered past Taya, he did not trample her. He leaned low from his saddle, defying gravity, his arm sweeping out like a striking snake. He did not grab her hand. He grabbed the back of her bodice and shoved her. It was a rough, violent push that sent Taya sprawling into the dirt behind the cover of the flat rock she had been sitting on. The force knocked the wind out of her and the pistol from her hand. Thud. The bullet that had missed Nokoni struck the earth exactly where Taya had been standing a second before, kicking up a spray of red dust that coated her face. If she had remained standing, if he had not shoved her, the large caliber round would have shattered her hip or spine, as she had been directly in the line of fire between the bushwhacker and the warrior. Taya lay in the dirt, coughing, her ears ringing. She looked up, dazed. Nokoni had wheeled his horse around. He had an arrow drawn. Now, the string pulled back to his ear. He released it in a fluid motion. The shaft flew toward the mesquite bush. There was a yelp of pain, followed by the sound of a man cursing and crashing through the undergrowth, retreating. The bushwhacker, a scalp hunter, likely one of the men who collected the $50 bounty the territory offered for native hair, had missed his prize and taken an arrow in the shoulder for his trouble. Silence returned to the riverbank, heavier than before. Taya pushed herself up on her trembling arms. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, her face smeared with mud. She looked for her pistol, but it lay 5 feet away. She looked up at the ridge. Nokoni was still there. He had reloaded his bow. He was looking down at her, his chest heaving slightly from the exertion. He could have let the white hunter shoot her by accident. He could have ridden away and let the white men kill each other, but he had ridden into the line of fire to knock her down. Taya wiped the dust from her mouth. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt. She looked at the savage, the enemy, the nightmare of every woman in the Concho Valley. "Why?" she whispered, though she knew he could not hear her. Nokoni stared at her for a long moment. He saw the confusion in her blue eyes. He saw that she was still alive. He gave a sharp nod, more to himself than to her, as if confirming a decision he barely understood himself. Then, without a word, he turned his paint horse and galloped away, disappearing over the ridge line, leaving Taya Cooper alone in the dust with a bruised shoulder and a world that had just turned upside down. The ride back to the ranch passed in a blur. Taya kept looking over her shoulder, but the scalp hunter was gone. and Noconi was a memory. When she rode into the yard, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. The ranch hands were busy with the evening chores. Cowboys were moving the herd into the lower paddock, their whistles piercing the air. It all looked so normal, so mundane. They did not know that 10 miles away, death had come calling and had been turned away by the hand of an enemy. She slid off Bess, her legs shaking when they hit the ground. She handed the reins to an old stable hand named Jeb. "Miss Taya, you look like you wrestled a steer," Jeb said, eyeing her torn dress and dirty face. "Your daddy's gonna have a fit." "I took a spill. Jeb, that is all." Taya lied, her voice sounding hollow to her own ears. "Is he inside?" "In the parlor, with Major Briggs. They have been in there for 2 hours." Taya stiffened. Major Briggs, the man who spoke of civilization and safety, the man who hired scalp hunters or at least looked the other way when they operated in the valley. She walked toward the house, her boots crunching on the gravel. She paused at the water trough to wash her face. The water was cool, but it could not wash away the memory of the heat radiating from Noconi's horse as it flew past her, or the rough strength of his hand shoving her to safety. She had been raised to believe that the Comanche were godless monsters who killed for sport. The preacher said it on Sundays. Her father said it at dinner. Major Briggs said it in the town square. He saved me, she thought, the realization settling in her mind like a heavy stone. A white man tried to kill him and nearly killed me. A Comanche saved us both. She dried her face with her sleeve and walked up the porch steps. She could hear the voices inside. "Essential for the security of the region," Briggs was saying. "Once we make the sweep, the valley will be clean." "And Taya," her father's voice asked, sounding weary. "She will be protected. I will make her the envy of every woman in Texas. Elias, you have my word." Taya stopped at the door, her hand hovering over the latch. They were discussing her life as if she were a parcel of land to be annexed. Briggs wanted to sweep the valley. He meant Noconi. He meant the man who had just spared her life. She felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. It replaced the fear. She remembered the arrow in the ground, a warning, not an attack. Noconi just wanted to be left alone. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Both men turned. Major Briggs set his whiskey glass down and smiled, though his eyes flickered with distaste at her disheveled appearance. Elias looked relieved to have the negotiation interrupted, but shocked by her state. "Good heavens! Taya!" Elias exclaimed, standing up. "What happened to you?" "I had an accident. Father," she said, keeping her chin high. She looked at Briggs. "Major?" "Miss Taya," Briggs said, bowing slightly. "I was just telling your father how dangerous it is for you to be riding alone these days. The savages are getting bold." "Is that so?" Taya asked, her voice steady. "I saw no savages today. Major, only the land." Briggs stepped closer, invading her space. He smelled of bay rum and stale tobacco, a sharp contrast to the smell of sage and horse sweat that clung to her memory of the warrior. "They are out there. Miss Taya, waiting in the dark. Monsters who would defile a woman like you without a second thought. That is why your father and I have come to an agreement." "An agreement?" Taya looked at her father. Elias looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "To ensure your future," Briggs said smoothly, "and the safety of this ranch. We are to be married, my dear, in the spring." The room seemed to tilt. Married to Briggs. Married to the man who wanted to wipe out the people of the plains. An hour ago, a monster had saved her life. Now, a hero was claiming her freedom. Taya looked at the Major's soft, manicured hands, and then she thought of the scarred, rough hand of the Comanche. "I see," Taya said softly. She did not scream. She did not cry. She had learned something out there on the riverbank today. Silence could be a weapon, and you did not draw your gun until you had a clear shot. "You are quiet," Briggs observed, frowning. "I expected more emotion." "I am tired, Major," Taya said, turning toward the stairs. "It has been a long ride." She walked up the stairs, feeling their eyes on her back. She went into her room and closed the door, leaning against it. She slid her hand into her pocket, not for the derringer, but for the piece of charcoal she had unknowingly clenched in her fist the whole ride home. She walked to the window and looked out toward the dark hills in the west, somewhere out there, under the same moon. Nokoni was watching. "You saved the wrong girl," she whispered to the darkness. "Or maybe you saved the only one who can help you." She went to her washstand and scrubbed the dirt from her hands, but she could still feel the phantom pressure of his touch on her back. The debt was owed, a life for a life, and Taya Cooper paid her debts, downstairs. The clink of glasses marked the seal of a deal that would bring blood to the valley. But upstairs, a girl who was supposed to be a virgin sacrifice for a railroad contract began to sharpen her mind like a skinning knife. The war had come to the Cooper Ranch, but the sides were not as clear as the blue coats and the red skin. The line was drawn between those who were destroyed and those who survived, and Taya had just decided which side of the line she was going to stand on. 2 days passed, the tension on the ranch stretching thin like a wire about to snap. The air was thick with the dust of arriving cavalry horses. Blue coats swarmed the south pasture, setting up tents and cleaning their carbines. The sound of martial drums replaced the lowing of cattle. On the afternoon of the second day, Taya sought escape. She saddled Bess and rode out toward the Limestone Creek, accompanied by Hattie, a freed woman who worked the ranch kitchen and was the closest thing Taya had to a mother since hers had passed. They were dismounted by the water, filling wooden buckets. Hattie, a woman of 40 with eyes that had seen too much sorrow to be easily frightened, kept glancing toward the ridges. "The air feels heavy, Miss Taya," Hattie murmured. "Birds aren't singing right. Even the crickets are holding their breath." Taya dipped her bucket, watching the ripples distort her reflection. "It is the soldiers. Hattie, they scare everything away." "Not just soldiers," Hattie said, straightening up and pointing a trembling finger toward the west. "Look!" A thin column of gray smoke was rising from a rocky outcrop a mile away. It was not a campfire. The puffs were rhythmic, broken, intentional. "Comanche," Taya whispered. Panic flared in Hattie's eyes. "We need to go. Now, child, before they come down." "Wait," Taya said, a strange instinct taking hold of her. She remembered the arrow. It had been a warning. "Take the horses back to the tree line. Hattie, stay hidden." "I am not leaving you," Hattie protested. "Please," Taya insisted, her voice firm. "I need to see. If they wanted to kill us, we would be dead already." Reluctantly, Hattie led the horses back into the shade of the cottonwoods. Taya stood alone by the creek, her hand resting on the pistol in her pocket, though she knew it would be useless against a war party. She did not hear him approach. One moment, there was only the sound of the wind in the mesquite. The next, he was there. Nokoni stood on the opposite bank of the creek, 10 yards away. He was not on his horse this time. He stood on the ground, wearing leggings and a vest of intricate beadwork. His face was unpainted, revealing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the tired set of his mouth. Taya's breath caught. He looked less like a demon from a storybook and more like a man who carried the weight of a dying world on his shoulders. "You should not be here," Nokoni said. His voice carried easily over the bubbling water. "This is my home," Taya replied, though the word felt hollow after the conversation in the parlor. "Home is where blood is not spilled," Nokoni said. He stepped closer to the water's edge. "The blue coats, they gather at your father's house. Major Briggs says you are planning to attack the settlements," Taya said, testing him. "He says he is here to protect us." Nokoni let out a short, bitter laugh. "Protect, that is the word they use before they steal. Listen to me. Woman of the Cooper Ranch, the soldier chief does not want peace. He wants the canyon. He wants the water that runs through it for the Iron Horse path." Taya stepped forward, her boots sinking into the soft mud. "He says you ambush women. He says you kill without mercy." "I kill soldiers," Nokoni said, his eyes hard and unapologetic. "I kill men who come to burn my lodges. But I do not hunt women. I do not hunt children. The soldier chief knows this. but he needs a story to tell the papers in the East. He looked at her intensely, his gaze piercing through her defenses. He will come to the canyon. He will not find warriors. We will be gone, but he will find the old ones who cannot walk. He will find the mothers with new babies, and he will kill them. And he will tell you that we fought like devils. Taya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Why are you telling me this? Because you did not shoot, Nokoni said simply. And because when the fire starts, the wind blows both ways. If he kills my people to steal the land, he will not stop with us. He will eat your father's land too. That is the way of the wolf. He turned to leave, melting back into the brush. Wait, Taya called out. What is your name? He paused, half hidden by the shadows of the mesquite. I am Nokoni. It means he who wanders. Then he was gone, leaving Taya with a bucket of water and a truth that was heavier than lead. The night before the expedition was set to launch. The ranch house was alive with the clatter of sabers and the roar of drunken bravado. Major Briggs had turned the dining room into a command center. Maps were spread across the table, held down by whiskey bottles. Taya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, but sleep was impossible. The image of Nokoni's eyes haunted her. He will kill them. He will tell you that we fought like devils. She heard heavy boots on the porch below her window. The smell of cigar smoke drifted up. She crept out of bed and knelt by the window, peering through the slats of the shutter. Major Briggs was standing there with his second-in-command, a lieutenant named Kellers. The scouts report the main body of warriors is hunting to the north, Kellers said, his voice low. The canyon camp is mostly non-combatants. Major, women, elders. Perfect, Briggs replied. The strike of a match illuminated his face, casting deep shadows that made his smile look skeletal. We strike at dawn. No prisoners. Lieutenant, I want bodies. Enough bodies to justify a full regiment being stationed here permanently. But, sir, Kellers hesitated. If there are no warriors fighting back, then we make it look like they did. Briggs snapped. We plant the rifles. We arrow a few of our own horses if we have to. The railroad investors need a pacified territory. Kellers, they do not care how the ink dries, as long as the contract is signed, and once Cooper signs the land over to me for the right-of-way, we will be rich men. And the girl, Kellers asked. The girl is the seal on the deal, Briggs said, blowing a ring of smoke. She will make a fine trophy, and if she proves difficult, well, the frontier is a dangerous place. Accidents happen. Taya pulled back from the window, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a gasp. It was not just land. It was murder. Calculated, cold-blooded murder of women and children, and a conspiracy to steal everything her father had worked for. And she was the final piece of the puzzle, a disposable object to be used and discarded. She looked around her room, the lace curtains, the porcelain dolls on the shelf, the dresses in the wardrobe. It was all a cage. A fierce, desperate resolve took hold of her. She could not let this happen. She could not let Nokoni's people be slaughtered while she sat in a room and embroidered a handkerchief. She moved quickly. She stripped off her nightgown and pulled on her riding trousers and a heavy wool shirt. She shoved her feet into her boots. She grabbed a thick coat and stuffed the derringer into her belt. She climbed out the window, moving along the trellis with a practiced ease she had not used since childhood. The stables were guarded, but Taya knew the ranch better than any soldier. She moved through the shadows, avoiding the pools of lantern light. She found Bess in the rear paddock, bridled her quickly without a saddle to save time, and led her through a gap in the fence, once they were clear of the yard. Taya swung onto the mare's back. The sky opened up as if on cue, a sudden, violent squall sweeping down from the mountains. Rain lashed against her face, cold and stinging. "Run, Bess," she whispered. "Run!" The storm turned the world into a chaotic blur of gray and black. The dry creek beds became rushing torrents of mud. Taya rode blindly, guided only by the lightning flashes and her memory of where Nokoni had pointed. She was cold, soaked to the bone, her teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. But she pushed on. Every time she thought of turning back, she saw Briggs's face in the matchlight, smiling about the slaughter of children. She did not see the riders until they were on top of her. Shadows detached themselves from the darkness. Hands grabbed her reins. Bess reared, screaming in panic. Taya reached for her pistol, but a strong hand gripped her wrist, twisting it until she cried out and dropped the weapon. Rough hands hauled her off the horse. She landed in the mud, gasping for air. Lightning flashed, illuminating 3 figures standing over her. They were Comanche scouts, their faces painted for war, their eyes wide with hostility. One of them, a young warrior with a scar across his nose, raised a war club. He shouted something in his tongue, a sound of anger and accusation. They thought she was a spy for the soldiers. "No!" Taya screamed, holding up her hands. "I need to see Nokoni. Briggs is coming! Briggs is coming!" The warrior did not understand. He raised the club higher, ready to crush her skull. "Stop!" The voice cracked like a whip through the storm. A 4th rider emerged from the gloom. Nokoni. He slid from his horse and pushed the young warrior back. He looked down at Taya, who was shivering in the mud, her hair plastered to her face, looking small and broken. He grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. "You!" he growled, dragging her close so she could hear him over the wind. "Why are you here? Did you bring the blue coats?" "No," Taya sobbed, clutching the lapels of his vest. "I came alone. Briggs. He knows the warriors are gone. He is coming at dawn. He is going to kill everyone. The women, the babies. He said no prisoners." Nokoni went still. The water ran down his face like tears he refused to shed. He looked into her eyes, searching for the lie. He saw only terror and a desperate truth. He turned to his men and barked a series of commands. 2 of them mounted up and rode hard toward the canyon. The young warrior with the club glared at Taya but lowered his weapon. "You come," Nokoni said, gripping her arm tight. "Where?" Taya asked, her voice trembling. "To the camp," he said grimly. "If you lie, you die first." He threw her onto his horse, mounting behind her. His body was hard and warm against her freezing back. He wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her from falling, and kicked the horse into a gallop. The Comanche camp was hidden in a deep fold of the canyon, sheltered from the wind, but not from the fear that hung in the air. Nokoni dragged Taya into the largest lodge. Inside, a fire burned low. Several elders sat in a circle, their faces lined like old leather maps. Nokoni pushed Taya toward the fire. She fell to her knees, reaching out toward the warmth, her body shaking violently. "Speak," Nokoni commanded. He stood over her, water dripping from his long hair onto the dirt floor. "Tell them what you told me." Taya looked up at the circle of faces. These were the monsters her father spoke of, but she saw only an old man with clouded eyes, a woman holding a sleeping infant, and warriors whose faces were etched with worry. "Major Briggs is coming at dawn," Taya said, her voice raspy. "He has 20 men, maybe more. He knows your fighting men are north hunting. He plans to massacre the camp and plant weapons on the bodies to make it look like you attacked him. He wants the land for the railroad." A murmur of anger and fear rippled through the lodge. A young warrior, whom Nokoni called Black Fox, stood up and shouted, pointing a knife at Taya. "She is a liar," Black Fox yelled in broken English. "She is the daughter of the rancher. She comes to mark the target." "I am not," Taya cried, tears hot on her cold cheeks. "I ran away. I left my father. If I go back, Briggs will—" "He owns me now, too." The elder, a man with white braids wrapped in otter fur, raised a hand. The tent fell silent. He looked at Nokoni. "What does your heart say, grandson?" the elder asked in Comanche, though Taya understood the tone. Nokoni looked at Taya. He saw the mud on her clothes, the bruises on her wrist where his scout had grabbed her. He saw a girl who had been raised to hate him, kneeling in the dirt to save his kin. "She speaks the truth," Nokoni said, his voice low and resonant. "I saw it in her eyes at the river, and I see it now. A liar does not ride into a storm to die. Then we must run," the elder said. "We cannot fight with long knives with only a few bows." "No," Black Fox argued. "We ambush them. We kill them all. If we run, they will hunt us down in the open, Nokoni said, stepping into the center of the circle. If we fight head-on, they have carbines and we have arrows. We will die. He looked at Taya again. A dangerous idea was forming in his mind. We do not run, Nokoni said, and we do not attack as they expect. We change the game. He turned to Taya. You stay. Taya's eyes widened. I have to go back. If my father finds out I am gone... If you go back, you will tell them we are ready. Black Fox spat. No, Nokoni said, silencing him. She stays because she has chosen a side. Tonight, you are a prisoner. Taya Cooper, for your safety, and for ours. He knelt down in front of her. His dark eyes were inches from hers. The heat of the fire and the intensity of his gaze made her light-headed. You have crossed the line. Little rancher, Nokoni whispered. There is no road back to the White House now. Tonight, you sleep on the ground. Tomorrow, we bleed together. Taya looked at him, and she realized he was right. The moment she climbed out that window, she had burned the bridge. She was a traitor to her race, a runaway daughter, and the only hope these people had. She nodded slowly. I understand. Nokoni stood up and tossed a buffalo robe over her shivering shoulders. It was heavy and smelled of smoke and musk. A wild, ancient scent. Rest, he commanded. The dawn brings death. We must be awake to greet it. Outside the lodge, the storm raged on, washing away the footprints Taya had made, erasing the path that led back to her old life. She pulled the robe tighter, watching Nokoni check his weapons by the firelight. The inciting spark had been struck. The fire was coming, and she was right in the middle of it. The sun rose over the canyon rim, not with the gentle promise of a new day, but with the harsh glare of an interrogation lamp. Taya Cooper woke to the smell of wood smoke and the rhythmic scraping of hide against stone. She was not bound, but she was not free. For 3 days, she had lived in the twilight world of the honorary prisoner. She was free to walk within the perimeter of the camp, but she felt the eyes of the sentries on her back every time she strayed too close to the pony herd. An older woman, whose name Taya learned was Sunrise, bustled into the lodge. Sunrise was the matriarch of this small band, a woman with skin like cracked parchment and eyes that missed nothing. She was Nokoni's aunt, and she had taken charge of the white captive with a mixture of suspicion and maternal annoyance. Eat, Sunrise commanded, thrusting a wooden bowl of stew into Taya's hands. You are thin like a willow branch in winter. A wind will blow you away. Taya took the bowl. Thank you, she said. Sunrise grunted. Do not thank me. Eat. If you die of hunger, Nokoni will say I'm a bad host. Taya stepped out of the lodge. Blinking in the sunlight, the camp was a revelation. In the stories Major Briggs told, a Comanche camp was a place of darkness and savagery. But here, in the light of day, it was simply a village. She watched children chasing each other between the lodges, their laughter ringing off the canyon walls. They played a game with sticks and a hoop, shrieking with joy when one of them scored. It looked remarkably like the games the children played in the schoolyard back in town. Nearby, a group of women sat weaving baskets and repairing moccasins. They spoke in low, musical tones, occasionally glancing at Taya with curiosity rather than malice. Then she saw something that made her breath hitch. Under the shade of a cottonwood tree, a young mother was rocking a child. The little boy was flushed with fever, his small chest heaving as a racking cough shook his body. The mother wiped his forehead with a damp cloth, murmuring soft words of comfort, her face etched with the same terrified helplessness Taya had seen on her own mother's face 10 years ago. Taya remembered her brother, Samuel. He had been 6 years old when the fever took him. She remembered the sound of his coughing filling the ranch house, a sound that haunted her father into silence and drove her mother to an early grave. They are just people, Taya thought, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. They get sick. They love their children. They fear the dark. Her gaze drifted to a warrior sitting by a fire. He had only one arm. The left sleeve of his shirt was pinned up. He was using his feet and his remaining hand to braid a complex leather bridle. He worked with a focused intensity, His brow furrowed. Taya had seen men like him sitting on the porch of the general store in town, Confederate veterans who had left limbs in Virginia or Tennessee, trying to find a way to be useful in a world that required two hands. Pain, it seemed to Taya, spoke the same language regardless of the color of the skin it lived in. "You look too hard," a deep voice said behind her. "You will wear out your eyes." Taya turned. Nokoni stood there. He looked tired. He had been riding patrol all night, and dust coated his shoulders. "I am looking at things I was told did not exist," Taya replied, meeting his gaze. Nokoni crossed his arms. "And what were you told existed?" "Monsters," she said honestly. "Demons who eat children." Nokoni's expression did not change, but a flicker of amusement touched his eyes. "We prefer buffalo. Children are too strong." Taya blinked, surprised by the dry wit. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You made a joke. I did not think you knew how—" "I know many things," Nokoni said, his face returning to its usual stoic mask. "You are always so serious," Taya said, emboldened by the interaction. "My father has a statue in his study, a bust of a Roman emperor. You look just like him. Stone face." "Stone endures," Nokoni replied, his voice flat. "Sand blows away. Stone also cracks if it gets too cold," Taya countered. Nokoni looked at her, really looked at her. She was wearing a buckskin dress that Sunrise had given her, as her riding clothes were being washed. Her golden hair was braided back. She looked less like a rancher's daughter and more like a woman of the plains, save for the defiant blue of her eyes. "The Major," Nokoni said, the humor vanishing. "He is a man of paper. He writes treaties. He writes orders. He writes lies," Taya corrected. Nokoni looked toward the horizon. 5 years ago, I rode to meet a colonel near the Red River. I carried a white flag, a symbol of parley. I wanted to talk about food for my people. The winter has been hard." He unconsciously touched the scar on his chest through his shirt. The colonel smiled. Nokoni continued, his voice devoid of emotion, which made the story worse. "He offered me tobacco, and while I reached for it, his sharpshooter put a bullet through my chest. They did not want peace. They wanted a trophy." Taya felt a cold sickness in her stomach. "Nokoni, that is why I find it hard to believe you," he admitted, turning his dark eyes on her. "A white flag, a white woman. Sometimes the prettiest things are the deadliest traps." "I am not a trap," Taya said softly. "I am the one trying to spring it before it snaps on you." Before Nokoni could respond, the thundering of hooves interrupted them. A scout rode into the camp, his horse lathered in sweat. He slid from the saddle and ran to Nokoni, speaking rapidly in Comanche. Taya could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Urgency, fear. Nokoni's face hardened into granite. He turned to the scout and gave a sharp order, then looked back at Taya. "Your major is moving," Nokoni said. "He has gathered men, not just soldiers. He has hired the regulators." Taya gasped. The regulators were mercenaries, men who killed for money and sport. They were worse than the army. The army had rules. However often they broke them, the regulators had none. "How long?" Taya asked. 3 days, Nokoni said. "Maybe 4 if the mud slows them. They are bringing a wagon gun, a Gatling." The camp stirred. The news spread like wildfire. Elders gathered. Warriors checked their rifles. The air of peaceful domesticity vanished, replaced by the sharp tang of adrenaline. A council was called immediately in the center of the camp. Taya stood on the periphery, watching. "We must run to the high mountains," an elder argued. "We cannot fight with a wagon gun. We will starve in the high mountains this late in the season," a young warrior named Red Hawk shouted. He was fiery, impulsive, and hated Taya with a visible passion. "We should strike them now, ambush them in the narrow pass before they can set up the gun." "They expect an ambush," Nokoni said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Briggs is not a fool. He will have scouts on the ridges. If we attack, we walk into his kill zone." "Then what?" Red Hawk demanded. Do we sit here and wait to die because of the word of this white witch? He pointed a finger at Taya. She leads them here. She is the beacon. Taya stepped forward. Her heart was hammering, but she pushed the fear down. I can help you. The council fell silent. All eyes turned to her. I know how they will come, Taya said, her voice steady. Briggs is heavy. He has wagons and a Gatling gun. He has to take the flat road by the Devil's Elbow. He cannot take the goat trails. We know this, Red Hawk sneered. But you do not know that the heavy rains have washed out the ford at Serpent Creek, Taya said. I saw it 2 weeks ago when I was checking cattle. If he tries to cross there with heavy wagons, he will bog down. He will have to double back to the limestone crossing. She picked up a stick and drew a line in the dirt. Here, this is the limestone crossing. It is a choke point, but there is a ridge above it, hidden by mesquite. You can put men there. You can stop the wagons without exposing yourself to the gun. Nokoni looked at the map in the dirt. He studied the lines. If she lies, Red Hawk warned, she sends our best men into a trap. I do not lie, Taya snapped. I want Briggs stopped as much as you do. He wants to buy me like a horse. I am fighting for my life too. Sunrise stepped forward from the circle of women. She placed a hand on Taya's shoulder. The girl rode through the storm to warn us. A coward does not do that. A traitor does not do that. She has the spirit of a warrior. Nokoni looked from his aunt to Taya. He saw the fire in Taya's blue eyes. He remembered the feel of her trembling against his back as they rode through the rain, and the way she had looked at the sick child earlier that morning. We cannot risk the whole war party on a guess, Nokoni decided. I need to see this washed-out ford. I need to see if the limestone crossing is viable. I will take you, Taya said. No, Red Hawk protested. Yes, Nokoni said. You will come too, Red Hawk. And if she leads us into a trap, you have my permission to put an arrow in her heart. Taya felt the blood drain from her face, but she nodded. Agreed. They rode out an hour later. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed rain. The air was thick and humid. Taya rode Bess, flanking Nokoni, while Red Hawk rode behind them, his bow unstrung but close at hand, his eyes drilling into her back. They moved quickly, keeping to the low ground to avoid silhouetting themselves against the sky. The landscape was treacherous. The recent storms had turned the dry washes into unpredictable traps of mud and quicksand. The ford is 2 miles east, Taya called out over the wind. As they descended into a narrow arroyo, the air pressure changed. It dropped suddenly, popping their ears. Taya pulled Bess up short. She tilted her head, listening. It was a sound she knew from growing up on the ranch, a sound more terrifying than a rattlesnake's warning. It was a low, distant rumble, like a freight train moving underground. Listen, she cried. It is thunder. Red Hawk dismissed, urging his pony forward into the dry creek bed. We cross here. No, Taya screamed. Get back, it is a flash flood. Nokoni looked at her, then at the dry sand of the creek. The sky above them was gray, but not pouring. The rain was falling miles away in the mountains, funneling down into this chute. Red Hawk back, Nokoni shouted. But the young warrior was already halfway across. She is trying to delay us. There is no water. Then the wall came. It rounded the bend of the canyon, a churning, brown beast of water. Mud and uprooted trees, 10 feet high and moving faster than a galloping horse. The roar became deafening. Red Hawk froze. His pony screamed and reared. Up! Taya shouted, pointing to a narrow goat path on the far bank, the only escape route that was not a sheer cliff. Ride up, you fool! Red Hawk kicked his pony. The animal scrambled for traction in the loose sand. The water was seconds away. Nokoni spurred his horse, not away from the danger, but toward the edge of the bank to throw a rope. But he was too far. Taya did not think. She knew Bess was sure-footed. She drove her heels into the mare's flanks and guided her not away, but parallel to the bank, shouting to Red Hawk. The mesquite root, grab the root. Red Hawk leaped from his pony just as the water hit. The pony was swept away in the brown torrent. Red Hawk scrambled up the muddy bank, his fingers clawing at the dirt, He slipped. Taya leaned from her saddle, risking her own balance, and extended her hand. "Take it." Red Hawk looked at the white hand, then at the death roaring below him. He grabbed her wrist. Taya groaned with the weight, her shoulder socket popping, but she held on. Nokoni was there a second later, grabbing Red Hawk's belt and hauling him onto solid ground. They collapsed on the high bank, gasping for breath. Below them, the arroyo was a raging river, carrying dead trees and boulders as if they were twigs. Red Hawk lay on his back, his chest heaving. He looked at Taya. She was rubbing her shoulder, her face pale but composed. She had saved him. She had saved the man who wanted to kill her. Nokoni looked at the raging water, then at Taya. "You knew the water was coming." "I know this land," Taya said, her voice shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "I told you, I hear the earth differently." Red Hawk sat up. He looked at his lost pony washing downstream, then at Taya. He did not smile, but the hatred was gone from his eyes. He nodded once, a sharp, jerky motion. It was an apology. It was a truce. "The ford at Serpent Creek will be like this," Nokoni said, looking at the violence of the water. "Briggs cannot cross there. He will have to go to the limestone crossing." "Then we have him," Taya said. They made camp that night in a small cave overlooking the valley, waiting for the water to recede so they could return to the main camp. A small fire crackled near the entrance, shielding them from the damp chill. Red Hawk took the first watch outside, leaving Nokoni and Taya by the fire. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, drying their clothes. "You have a strong grip for a ranch girl," Nokoni said, breaking the silence. "I have milked cows and roped calves since I was 10. Taya replied, "I am not made of porcelain. Nokoni." "I see that," he said. He poked the fire with a stick. "Why did you save him? He would have shot you if I gave the word." Taya hugged her knees to her chest. "Because he is fighting for his home, and because I am tired of death. My mother died when I was 9. I watched the light go out of her eyes. Then my brother, then my father. He did not die, but the part of him that was kind died. He became hard. He looked at the land and saw only money. He looked at me and saw a contract." She looked up at Nokoni. The firelight danced on his high cheekbones, softening the harsh angles of his face. "I do not want to be hard," she whispered. "I want to be free." Nokoni remained silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low, a rumble in his chest. "I had an older brother. His name was Eagle Flies. He taught me to ride. He taught me to hunt. He was the chief before me." Taya listened, sensing that this was a gift he did not give often. "He was killed by whiskey traders," Nokoni said. "They shot him for a buffalo robe. When he died, the heavy mantle fell on me. I did not want it. I wanted to ride the plains and watch the hawks. But a man does not choose his storm. He only chooses how he stands in it." He looked across the fire, and their eyes locked. In that moment, the cultural divide between them thinned until it was translucent. They were not Comanche and white. They were two people who had lost too much, two lonely souls burdened by duties they had not asked for. "We are both prisoners." "Taya," Nokoni said softly, using her name for the first time without the edge of irony. "I am a prisoner of my people's needs. You are a prisoner of your father's greed. Maybe we can break out," Taya said, her voice barely a whisper. The air between them crackled, charged with a tension that was no longer about war. It was about recognition. It was the dangerous, terrifying thrill of being truly seen by another person. Nokoni held her gaze for a second longer, then looked back at the fire. "First, we must survive the sunrise." But as Taya lay down on the hard stone floor of the cave, wrapping her coat around her, she felt a warmth that the fire could not provide. She was in the heart of the enemy camp, hunted by her own people, facing a battle against impossible odds. And yet, for the first time in her life, she did not feel alone. The stone face had cracked, and underneath, she had found a man whose heart beat in the same rhythm as hers. The rising action had begun, and the slope was getting steeper with every beat of the drum. The town of Concho Valley awoke not to the rooster's crow, but to the frantic ringing of the church bell. A column of black smoke rose from the Miller homestead on the outskirts of town, staining the morning sky like spilled ink. Major Harlan Briggs stood on the steps of the general store, his uniform immaculate, his face a mask of righteous fury. At his feet lay a charred fence post and a broken Comanche lance, its feathers singed but unmistakably native. A crowd had gathered, ranchers, shopkeepers, and women clutching their shawls tightly against the chill. "Behold!" Briggs shouted, his voice booming across the square. "While we spoke of peace, while we hesitated to strike, the savages showed their true nature. They have burned the Miller barn. They have stolen livestock. They have broken the treaty before the ink was even dry." A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Men gripped their hats, their knuckles white. "We cannot wait any longer," Briggs continued, gesturing to the north. "For the safety of every white woman and child in this valley, we must scour the canyon clean. We must drive them out, or put them under the sod. Who is with me?" A roar of approval went up. It was a sound fueled by fear and manipulated by a master of theater. Elias Cooper stood at the edge of the crowd, looking pale and hollowed out. He stared at the lance on the ground, a lance that looked too clean, too conveniently placed, but he said nothing. He had already sold his silence. 20 miles away, in the hidden camp, Taya Cooper received news that was far more personal and devastating. Jeb, the old stable hand from her father's ranch, had been found wandering near the canyon entrance by a patrol. Noconi had brought him blindfolded. Now, sitting by the fire, Jeb looked at Taya with tears in his rheumy eyes. "Miss Taya," Jeb choked out, twisting his hat in his hands. "The Major, he has told the whole town you were taken, kidnapped, dragged screaming from your bed by a war party." Taya felt a cold numbness spread through her limbs. "And my father, does he know I left on my own?" Jeb looked down at his boots. "Your daddy, he is telling folks he heard the struggle. He is saying you are a victim, Miss Taya. But the town, the women—" "Say it, Jeb," Taya said, her voice steel. "They are saying that even if you come back, you won't be the same," Jeb whispered, his face burning with shame. "They are saying a woman who spends nights in a Comanche camp is soiled, damaged goods." Taya closed her eyes. It was a masterstroke by Briggs. If she returned now, she would be a social pariah, her word worthless against the hero Major. If she stayed, she was a traitor. Her father, in his weakness, had chosen his reputation over his daughter's truth. Noconi stood in the shadows of the lodge, listening. He saw the way Taya's shoulders slumped, not with defeat, but with the heavy burden of betrayal. He stepped forward as Jeb was led away to be fed. "Your father chooses the easy path," Noconi said quietly. "It is the way of men who live in houses built by others." "He was my hero once," Taya said. Opening her eyes, they were dry, but they burned with a fierce, cold light. "Now he is just a man who owes money." She turned to Noconi. "If I am to be a savage in their eyes, then teach me to fight like one. If I am to be ruined, let me be ruined on my own terms." The lessons began the next morning. Noconi took her to a flat stretch of ground near the river. He stripped the saddle off Bess. "The saddle makes you tall," Noconi explained, circling the horse. "It makes you a target. To fight, you must be one with the beast. You must be low. You must be water flowing over a rock." He vaulted onto his paint horse in one fluid motion, hanging off the side, shielding his body with the animal's bulk while aiming his bow under the horse's neck. It was a display of acrobatic grace that took Taya's breath away. "Now you," he said. It was grueling. Taya fell. She fell into the dust, into the mud, bruising her hips and scraping her elbows. But each time, she got up, spitting dirt and glaring at him until he nodded for her to try again. He taught her how to hold a short bow, how to nock an arrow by feel without looking. He taught her how to reload her pistol while at a full gallop. "Don't fight the horse," Noconi murmured, his hand resting on her back to correct her posture. His touch was firm, professional, yet it sent a jolt of electricity through her that had nothing to do with combat. "Move with her. breathe when she breathes. He stood close to her, adjusting her grip on the bowstring. His chest brushed against her shoulder. She could smell the scent of sage and leather on him, a scent that was becoming as familiar and necessary to her as air. "Like this," he whispered, his breath stirring the hair at her temple. He reached around her to guide her hands. For a moment, she was encased in his arms, surrounded by his strength. The lesson paused. The world narrowed down to the heat of his body against hers and the rapid beating of her own heart. Taya turned her head slightly. His face was inches away. His dark eyes were not looking at the target. They were looking at her mouth. The air between them grew thick, charged with a magnetic pull that terrified and thrilled her. "Focus," Nokoni said, his voice rougher than usual. He stepped back abruptly, breaking the spell. "Or you will be dead before you lose the first arrow." 2 days later, the sky turned the color of a bruise. The air grew heavy and still. They were practicing near the shallow ford of the river. Taya was riding bareback, pushing Bess hard, trying to master the hanging dismount Nokoni had shown her. "Again!" Nokoni shouted from the bank. Taya gritted her teeth. She was tired. She was sore. And the anger at Briggs and her father was a constant, burning coal in her chest. She kicked Bess into a gallop. The storm broke without warning. It was not a gradual build-up. The heavens simply opened and dumped a deluge of icy water onto the canyon. The wind howled, whipping the willows into a frenzy. "Taya, stop!" Nokoni yelled, seeing the clay bank turning slick. But Taya was in the grip of her own storm. She ignored him. She urged Bess toward the steep embankment, intending to slide down and cross the water as a final test of her courage. "I can do this!" she screamed into the wind. Bess hit the mud and lost her footing. The mare panicked, sliding sideways. Taya was thrown clear. She tumbled down the bank, hitting the water with a splash that knocked the air from her lungs. The river was not deep, but it was cold, a shocking, bone-numbing cold that seized her muscles. She floundered, gasping, the current dragging at her heavy skirt. She managed to grab a submerged root, coughing water, shivering violently. A splash beside her. Strong arms wrapped around her waist. Nokoni hauled her up, dragging her out of the current and onto the muddy bank. He did not let go. He pulled her against him, shielding her from the driving rain with his own body. They were both soaked to the skin, shivering, their chests heaving against each other. Nokoni looked down at her. His hair was plastered to his face, water dripping from his nose. He looked furious and terrified. "You foolish girl," he growled, his hands gripping her upper arms tightly. "The river does not care about your anger. You could have broken your neck." Taya looked up at him, her teeth chattering, her blue eyes wide and defiant. I wanted to show you." "Show me what?" Nokoni shook her slightly. "That you can die. I know you can die. Everyone can die. Living is the hard part." He pulled her closer, trying to share his warmth. The rain hammered down around them, isolating them in a curtain of gray. He looked at her wet face, her lips turning a pale violet from the cold. "You'll catch a terrible cold," the Comanche warned, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. Taya looked at him. She felt the heat radiating from his chest, burning through the wet buckskin. The anger at her father, the fear of Briggs, the shame of the town's gossip, it all washed away in the rain. All that was left was this man, this moment, and the undeniable truth of her own heart. She smiled, a slow, warm expression that defied the freezing rain. "Only if you let go," she whispered. Nokoni went still. The warning in his eyes melted into something else, a raw, naked hunger that mirrored her own. "I cannot let go," he admitted, his voice rough. "Not anymore." He lowered his head. Taya lifted hers. Their faces were wet with rain, their breaths mingling in the cold air. His lips were inches from hers. She could feel the ghost of the kiss before it happened, a promise of fire in the ice. "Nokoni!" The shout from the ridge shattered the world. Nokoni flinched as if struck. He pulled back, his eyes darting to the cliff top. A scout was waving frantically. The reality of the war crashed back in. They were not two lovers in the rain. They were a leader and a liability, standing on the edge of a massacre. Nokone looked at Taya one last time, a look of profound regret and longing. Then he stepped back, the distance between them feeling like a canyon. "We must go," he said, his voice flat again. "The scout brings news." Taya wrapped her arms around herself, the cold rushing back in with a vengeance. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The moment was gone, stolen by the war, just as everything else was being stolen. Inside the council lodge, the fire provided little comfort. The scout reported that Briggs was on the move. He had left the ranch with 30 men, 2 wagons, and the Gatling gun. They will reach the limestone crossing by tomorrow evening. Nokone outlined the plan. It was a desperate gamble. They would not attack the column directly. They would lure them into the box canyon past the crossing, sealing the entrance and exit with rock falls triggered by leverage poles. "We kill them all," Red Hawk said, sharpening his knife. "We leave no one to tell the tale." "No," Taya said. She stood by the fire, her hair drying in wild waves. "If you massacre them, the army will send 1,000 men. They will hunt you to the ends of the earth. You will prove Briggs right." "He comes to kill us," Red Hawk shouted. "Then we show him we are better," Taya countered. "We trap them. We disarm them. We make Briggs sign a confession. We make him admit to the arson, to the conspiracy. We bring witnesses." "Witnesses?" Nokone asked. "Dr. Stanton," Taya said, "and Reverend Thomas. They are with the column. Jeb told me. They are good men, dragged along by Briggs to lend legitimacy to his crusade. If they see the truth, if they see Briggs try to murder unarmed people, they will speak." Nokone looked at the fire. "You ask us to gamble our lives on the conscience of white men." "I ask you to gamble on the truth," Taya said. "Kill Briggs, and you are a murderer. Expose him, and you are a patriot protecting his home." Nokone looked at her. He saw the strength in her jaw, the same strength he had felt when she pulled Red Hawk from the flood. "We will try it your way," Nokone decided. "But if the doctor and the priest do not stand with us, then the arrows fly, and I will not stop them." The night before the battle, the camp was silent. The women and children had been moved to a high cave for safety. Only the warriors remained. Taya found Nokone standing at the edge of the camp, looking out over the dark valley. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. "You should be with the women," Nokone said without turning. "I am riding with you." Taya said, "I need to be there. Briggs needs to see me. He needs to know he didn't win." Nokone turned to face her. "If the trap fails, if the gun speaks, then I die with you," Taya said simply. Nokone stepped closer. He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I have fought many battles. Taya, I have never feared death. But tonight I fear it, because for the first time, I have something I am not ready to leave." Taya covered his hand with hers. "If you die because you listened to me, because you tried to be merciful instead of vengeance, I will not be able to live with that. If I do not fight for what I believe is right," Nokone replied, his voice soft, "then living is just a slow way of dying. You taught me that. You showed me that honor is not about blood. It is about standing up when everyone else is kneeling." He leaned down. This time, there was no shout to interrupt them. His lips brushed hers tentative at first, a question asked in the dark. Taya responded with fierce pressure, her hands tangling in his long hair. It was a kiss of desperation, of salt and sorrow. It was not the soft romance of a storybook. It was the hard, frantic connection of two people standing on the edge of a cliff. It tasted of rain and fear and a love that had no business existing in this world. They broke apart, breathless. Nokone rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "We end it. Tomorrow," Taya echoed. They stood there for a long moment, holding onto the fragile piece of the embrace, knowing that when the sun rose, the world would try to tear them apart with lead and steel. The column of dust marked their approach long before the sound of the wheels reached the ambush site. Major Briggs rode at the head of the procession, confident, arrogant, behind him. The Gatling gun trundled on its carriage, a mechanical beast of brass and iron. Dr. Stanton rode near the rear, looking uncomfortable in his saddle. Beside him was Reverend Thomas, clutching his Bible as if it were a shield. Noconi lay flat on the rim of the canyon, peering through a gap in the rocks. Taya lay beside him, her pistol checked and rechecked. They are entering the box. Noconi signaled Red Hawk on the opposite rim. Below them, Briggs halted his horse. He looked around the silent canyon walls. "Too quiet," he muttered. "Where are they?" "Maybe they ran. Major," a soldier suggested. "Noconi does not run," Briggs said, his hand drifting to his saber. Suddenly, a hawk screeched high above a natural sound, but one that signaled the unnatural boom. A massive boulder, pried loose by 3 warriors, crashed down behind the column, blocking the narrow exit. The horses screamed. Dust billowed up. "Ambush!" Briggs yelled. "Form up! Get the gun online! Hold fire!" Noconi's voice thundered from the rocks, amplified by the acoustics of the canyon. "We have you surrounded! Major, throw down your weapons!" Briggs looked up, his face twisting in a snarl. "Never fire at will." The soldiers raised their carbines. The Gatling gunner cranked the handle, but before the first shot could ring out, a figure stood up on the rim, a figure with golden hair, wearing a buckskin dress. "Stop!" Taya screamed, her voice piercing the confusion. "Major Briggs, look at me!" Briggs froze. The soldiers lowered their rifles. Stunned, the doctor and the Reverend gasped. "Taya," Briggs whispered, his face going pale. You are alive." "I am alive," Taya shouted. "I was not kidnapped, I ran away." "I ran away because you planned to murder these people. You burned the Miller barn, you lied to my father." "She has been turned," Briggs shouted to his men, desperation creeping into his voice. "The savages have brainwashed her, fire kill them all." "No!" Dr. Stanton yelled, spurring his horse forward. "Hold your fire! That is Elias Cooper's daughter!" The soldiers hesitated. The regulators, however, did not. They were paid to kill. "Kill the witch!" a regulator shouted, raising his rifle toward Taya. Crack! A single shot rang out from the rim. The regulator's rifle spun from his hands, shattered by a bullet from Noconi's Winchester. "The next one goes in ahead," Noconi warned. "Dr. Reverend, look at us. We do not fire. We ask for justice." The canyon held its breath. The fuse was lit, sparking and hissing. On one side, the lies of a major who wanted a kingdom. On the other, a warrior and a girl who wanted a future. And in the middle, the barrel of a Gatling gun, waiting to turn the silence into a slaughter. The silence in the box canyon was not empty. It was heavy, pressing down on the ears like deep water. The only sounds were the creak of saddle leather, the jingle of bit chains, and the metallic rattle of the Gatling gun carriage bouncing over the uneven limestone floor. Major Harlan Briggs rode with his chin high, his eyes scanning the rim rock. The canyon walls rose 300 feet on either side, sheer and unforgiving. He felt the trap before he saw it, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck that he had not felt since the battlefields of Virginia. "Halt!" Briggs signaled, raising a gloved hand. The column stopped. Dust settled slowly around the horses' hooves. "Why are we stopping?" Major Dr. Stanton asked, wiping sweat from his brow with a silk handkerchief. "The scouts said the trail was clear." "The scouts were wrong," Briggs muttered, as if in answer to his words. The sound of a bone whistle pierced the air, a shrill, haunting shriek that echoed off the stone walls. Movement rippled along the canyon rim. It was not a sudden charge, but a slow, deliberate reveal. Dozens of Comanche warriors stood up from behind the rocks. They did not scream. They did not fire. They simply stood there, their silhouettes cut black against the blinding blue of the Texas sky, their bows drawn, their Winchesters held at the ready. Panic rippled through the cavalry ranks. Horses danced nervously. The young soldiers looked up, their faces draining of color as they realized they were in the bottom of a stone coffin. "Steady," Briggs barked, drawing his saber. "Gunner, bring the weapon to bear on the north rim." The soldier manning the Gatling gun cranked the handle, swinging the brass barrels upward. "Do not fire!" The voice came from the canyon floor, echoing from the narrow choke point ahead. Major Briggs froze. He knew that voice. A paint horse stepped out from the shadows of a large boulder. Nokoni sat in the saddle, his chest bare, a single eagle feather in his hair. But it was the rider beside him that made the breath catch in the throats of the men from Concho Valley. Taya Cooper rode Bess. She wore a buckskin dress, her golden hair loose and wild around her shoulders. She did not look like a captive. She sat tall, her back straight, her blue eyes blazing with a fierce, cold light. "Taya," Dr. Stanton gasped, urging his horse forward a few steps. "Good Lord, child, you are alive." "I am alive. Doctor," Taya called out, her voice steady and clear. "And I am free." Briggs's face twisted. The mask of the concerned suitor slipped, revealing the predator beneath. "She is delirious," he shouted to his men. "The savages have drugged her. They are using her as a shield. Marksmen, pick your targets." "No," Taya screamed, riding forward, placing herself between the column and Nokoni. "Look at me. Look at my hands. I am not bound. I am here because I chose to be." She looked directly at Reverend Thomas, who was clutching his Bible so hard his knuckles were white. "Reverend, you baptized me. You know I do not lie. Major Briggs burned the Miller barn. He sent men to ignite it to blame the Comanche. He brought you here today not to serve justice, but to witness a massacre." "Lies," Briggs roared. "She has turned traitor. She sleeps with the enemy." "I stand with the truth," Taya retorted. "Major Briggs plans to kill the women and children hiding in the caves. He plans to plant weapons on their bodies. He wants this land for the railroad, and he is willing to pave it with blood to get it." A murmur of confusion went through the ranks. The soldiers lowered their rifles slightly. They had signed up to fight warriors, not to murder families. "Dr. Stanton," Taya pleaded, her eyes locking onto the physician. "Look at them on the ridge. They could have killed you 5 minutes ago. They haven't fired a shot. Does that look like a war party thirsty for blood?" Stanton looked up. He saw the warriors standing motionless. He looked at Briggs, whose face was purple with rage. The pieces of the puzzle began to click together in the doctor's mind. "Major," Stanton said, his voice trembling but firm, "perhaps we should hear her out. If there are women and children, there are only targets," Briggs snapped. He turned to the group of regulators, the hired guns who rode on the flanks. "What are you waiting for? I pay you to fight. Not to listen to the ramblings of a hysterical woman, kill the savage, kill the girl." Most of the men hesitated, sensing the shift in the wind. But one regulator, a man with a scar across his nose and eyes devoid of soul, raised his Winchester. He did not aim at the ridge. He aimed at Nokoni. The crack of the rifle was deafening in the enclosed space. Taya screamed. Nokoni jerked in his saddle. The bullet spun him around, tearing through the flesh of his shoulder. Blood sprayed onto the dust. The truce shattered. "Fire!" Briggs yelled. The canyon exploded into chaos. The Gatling gun roared to life, its barrels spinning, spitting a hail of lead that chewed up the rocks where Nokoni and Taya had been a second before. But the Comanche were ready. From the rim, a rain of arrows and precision rifle fire poured down. But they did not shoot to kill the soldiers. They shot the horses of the regulators. They shot the hands of the men manning the Gatling gun. Nokoni had slid from his horse, dragging Taya down behind the cover of a fallen slab of limestone. He was bleeding, his face pale, but his eyes were clear. "Stay down," he ordered, pressing her into the dirt. "You're hit," Taya cried, trying to press her hand against his wound. "It is nothing," Nokoni gritted out. He raised his own rifle and fired. The Gatling gunner crumpled, clutching his shattered hand. The gun fell silent. The battle became a swirling melee of dust and confusion. The soldiers, leaderless and confused, tried to find cover. The regulators, realizing they were in a kill box, fought with the desperation of rats. Taya peered over the rock. She saw Briggs. The major was not firing at the warriors on the ridge. He was standing near his horse, his revolver leveled. He was looking for her. His eyes were wide with a madness that went beyond greed. He realized that as long as she breathed, his narrative was dead. As long as she lived to speak to the doctor and the reverend, he would hang. Briggs saw her. A cruel smile touched his lips. He raised his Colt Peacemaker, aiming directly at Taya's head. "Goodbye, my dear," he mouthed. Time seemed to slow down. Taya saw the hammer of the pistol pull back. She saw the black bore of the barrel. She could not move, but Nokoni saw it too. For 5 years, Nokoni had carried the memory of a white flag and a bullet in the chest. He had sworn never to trust a white man again. He had sworn that he would never again stand unprotected before their guns. But as he saw the finger tighten on the trigger, he did not think of history. He did not think of race. He thought only of the woman who had pulled him from the flood. Nokoni launched himself from the cover of the rock. He did not tackle Briggs. He threw himself in front of Taya. Bang! The sound was dull and heavy. Nokoni's body jerked violently as the heavy .45 caliber slug slammed into his side, just above the hip. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and he collapsed backward, landing heavily in Taya's arms. "No!" Taya's scream tore through her throat, raw and agonizing. She fell back with him, clutching his shirt, feeling the hot rush of blood soaking her hands. He had done it. He had taken the bullet meant for her. The cycle of betrayal had been broken by an act of supreme sacrifice. "Nokoni," she sobbed, pressing her hands frantically against the wound. Briggs stood there, stunned. He had missed the girl. He raised the gun again, his hand shaking, but the shot had changed everything. The soldiers, seeing the major shoot at a woman and a man who had jumped to save her, lowered their weapons. "That's enough," Dr. Stanton roared, jumping from his horse and running into the line of fire. "Cease fire in the name of God! Cease fire!" But the regulators were not done. One of them, seeing the confusion, drew a long Bowie knife and lunged toward a young cavalry private who was too terrified to fight back. Taya saw the flash of steel. She looked at Nokoni, gasping for breath in the dirt. A cold, lethal fury seized her heart. She was not just a rancher's daughter anymore. She was a warrior trained by the man bleeding in her arms. She grabbed the pistol from Nokoni's belt. She did not hesitate. She rolled onto her knees, leveled the heavy weapon, and fired. The bullet struck the regulator's knife hand, shattering the wrist. The man screamed and dropped the blade. Taya stood up. She cocked the hammer again, aiming it at Briggs. Her hands were red with Nokoni's blood. Her face was a mask of tragedy and rage. "Drop it," she commanded, her voice cutting through the din of the dying battle. Briggs looked around. His regulators were disarmed or wounded. The Comanche warriors had descended from the cliffs, surrounding the column with drawn bows. His own soldiers were looking at him with disgust. "You cannot shoot me," Briggs sneered, though his voice wavered. "I am an officer of the United States Army. You are a murderer," Taya said, stepping over the rocks. "And you are done." Briggs tried to raise his gun one last time, a final act of spite. Before he could fire, a shadow moved. Red Hawk, who had descended the cliff, swung his war club. It struck Briggs's wrist with a sickening crack. The gun flew away. Red Hawk kicked Briggs in the chest, sending him sprawling into the dust. In seconds, Briggs was pinned. Red Hawk knelt on his chest, a knife pressed against the major's throat. "Let me take his hair," Red Hawk growled. Looking at Nokoni, Nokoni struggled to sit up, Taya supporting him. His face was gray, beads of sweat standing out on his forehead. He looked at the man who had tormented his people for years. "No," Nokoni wheezed. "Not yet." He looked at Dr. Stanton and Reverend Thomas, who were huddled nearby, staring in horror at the carnage. "Bring them," Nokoni commanded. The warriors shoved the doctor and the Reverend forward. "Look at him," Nokoni said, pointing a trembling hand at Briggs. "Look at the hero of the valley." Taya knelt beside Briggs, keeping the pistol trained on his heart. "Tell them," she hissed. "Tell them about the Miller barn. Tell them about the orders to kill the children." "Ah, go to hell," Briggs spat, blood trickling from his lip. "You are already there, Major," Taya said. But if you want to leave this canyon alive, you will speak the truth, or I will let Red Hawk finish what he started." Red Hawk pressed the knife tip into Briggs's skin. A thin line of blood appeared. Fear, cold and absolute, finally broke through Briggs's arrogance. He looked at the circle of dark faces, at the soldiers who had turned their backs on him, and at the girl he had underestimated. It was necessary," Briggs stammered, his eyes darting wildly. "Progress, the railroad. They are just savages. Stanton, they don't use the land. We needed a reason to clear them out, the Miller barn. It was just a spark to start the fire." "And Taya?" Stanton asked, his voice shaking with fury. "You said she was kidnapped. She was in the way," Briggs screamed, his composure shattering completely. "She is just a woman. She was supposed to be the grieving widow, not a squaw lover. They are all just cattle obstacles to be removed." The silence that followed was absolute. The confession hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Reverend Thomas closed his eyes and made the sign of the cross. "God forgive you, Harlan, because I cannot." Taya stood up slowly. She looked down at the man who had tried to buy her, then tried to kill her. She wiped the blood from her cheek, Nokoni's blood. "I'm not property," Taya said, her voice ringing off the canyon walls. "Neither are they." She looked at the soldiers. "This man tried to make you murderers. He tried to make you kill women and children for his own profit. Is that the oath you took?" The young soldiers lowered their heads. One by one, they holstered their weapons. Red Hawk looked up at Taya, then at Nokoni. "He dies now." Nokoni was fading. The wound in his side was deep. He looked at Taya. "It is your choice. Taya, he is your enemy as much as mine. Do we feed the earth with him?" Taya looked at the knife at Briggs's throat. Every instinct in her body screamed for her to nod, to let the blade slice, to end the threat permanently. It would be justice. It would be satisfying. But then she looked at Briggs's eyes. She saw the terror of an animal. If they killed him now, here in the dirt, he would become a martyr to the people back east. The papers would say he died fighting savages. His lies would outlive him. "No," Taya said, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision. Red Hawk looked furious. "He deserves death." "He deserves worse," Taya said. "He deserves the truth." She turned to Dr. Stanton. "Doctor, you have paper in your saddlebag." "I do," Stanton said, puzzled. "Write it down," Taya commanded. "Everything he just said, make him sign it. You sign it. The Reverend signs it. And 3 of your soldiers sign it. A sworn affidavit of attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy." "You want to arrest him?" Stanton asked. "I want to chain him," Taya said. "I want him dragged back to Fort Concho in irons. I want him tried in a court where the whole territory can hear what he did. If we kill him, he is a hero. If we try him, he is a monster." She looked at Nokoni. "This is the harder path, but it is the only one that saves your people's name." Nokoni looked at her. His vision was blurring, but he saw the steel in her spine. She was right. Killing Briggs was the way of war. Destroying his legacy was the way of victory. "Do it," Nokoni whispered. Red Hawk growled in frustration but pulled the knife away. He grabbed Briggs by the collar and hauled him up, slamming him against the wheel of the Gatling gun. "Right," Red Hawk snarled at the doctor, as the doctor began to scratch out the confession on a notepad. The adrenaline that had been holding Nokoni upright finally ran out. His knees buckled. "Nokoni!" Taya dropped the gun and caught him. He was heavy, dead weight in her arms. She lowered him gently to the dusty ground. His skin was gray, clammy to the touch. The blood was still flowing from his side, pooling dark and slick on the limestone. "Stay with me," Taya begged, pressing her hands over the wound, uncaring of the blood that stained her dress, her arms, her soul. "Do not dare leave me now. You promised. You said living is the hard part." Nokoni looked up at her. His eyes were unfocused, swimming with pain. He tried to smile, but it was just a grimace. You caught a cold," he whispered, his voice barely audible, referencing the rain, the river, the moment they had almost kissed. Taya laughed, a choked, sobbing sound. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the dust and blood. "I am warm. I am right here. Just hold on." "The wolf," Nokoni murmured, his eyes drifting to where Briggs was being tied up. "The wolf is caught." "Yes," Taya said, stroking his hair, her hands trembling. "The wolf is caught. The war is over. Just rest. Dr. Stanton, help him." Dr. Stanton finished signing the paper. He looked over, seeing the urgency. He grabbed his medical bag and ran toward them. "Let me see," Stanton said, kneeling beside Taya. Taya moved back, her hands hovering, reluctant to let go. She watched the doctor cut away the blood-soaked shirt. She saw the ugly, dark hole in Nokoni's side. She looked up at the sky. The sun was high now, blinding and indifferent. The canyon was quiet again, save for the scratching of the pen and the ragged breathing of the man she loved. They had won the battle. They had exposed the lie. But as Taya looked at Nokoni's still face, she knew that the price of truth might be the only thing she had left to lose. The climax had passed, leaving behind the wreckage of a victory that felt terrifyingly like defeat. The fever came in the night, hot and relentless, like a summer wind trapped inside the lodge. Nokoni tossed on the buffalo robes, his skin slick with sweat, his breathing shallow and ragged. Taya sat beside him, a basin of cool water at her knees, wringing out a cloth that had once been part of a petticoat. Sunrise, the matriarch who had watched over Taya during her captivity, knelt on the other side of the fire. She was grinding herb sage, yarrow, and something that smelled of bitter earth into a paste. She handed the bowl to Taya without a word, her dark eyes watching the white girl's hands. "Press it deep," Sunrise instructed in broken English. "The lead is out, but the poison stays. You must draw it." Taya nodded. Her hands, once smooth and accustomed to needlepoint, were now stained with dirt and dried blood. She pulled back the dressing on Nokoni's side. The wound was angry, a dark, puckered hole in his copper skin. It was an ugly thing, a violent punctuation mark on the body of a man she had come to know as beautiful. She applied the poultice. Nokoni groaned in his delirium, his hands shooting out to grip her wrist. His grip was strong, bruising, born of a warrior's instinct to fight even while sleeping. "Shh," Taya whispered, leaning close to his ear. "I am here. It is Taya. You are safe." The tension in his arm slowly uncoiled. His hand slid from her wrist to her fingers, interlacing them weakly. He did not wake, but his breathing hitched, then settled into a smoother rhythm. For 3 days, this was their world. The victory at the canyon had bought them silence, but the price was being paid in this dim lodge. Taya learned the rhythm of the camp, the morning fires, the quiet conversations of the women, the way the warriors sat in vigil outside the tent, waiting for their leader to rise or die. She learned to sleep sitting up. She learned that water was more precious than gold when a fever raged. And she learned every line of Nokoni's face by the flickering light of the embers. On the 4th night, the fever broke. Taya was dozing, her head resting on her knees, when she felt a shift. The restless energy that radiated from him was gone, replaced by a stillness. She sat up quickly. Nokoni was watching her. His eyes were clear, the glassy sheen of infection gone. He looked weak, drained of color. But he was there. "You stayed," he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves. "I told you I would," Taya whispered. She poured water into a cup and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, some of it spilling down his chin. She wiped it away with her thumb, her touch lingering. He lay back, wincing as the movement pulled at the stitches Dr. Stanton had put in before the column left. His gaze traveled down to his chest, where the old scar from the peace parley lay, a jagged, white ridge of keloid tissue. Then his eyes moved to the bandages on his side. 2 marks, he murmured. "One from hate, one from—" He trailed off, looking at her. "From love," Taya finished for him, the word feeling heavy and dangerous on her tongue. She reached out and touched the old scar on his chest. Her fingertips grazed the rough skin. "This one was a betrayal. A white man trying to kill a spirit he could not break. Then she moved her hand down, resting it gently over the new bandage on his hip. And this one, this is a promise. A man shielding a woman who was supposed to be his enemy. Nokoni covered her hand with his own. His skin was cool now. It was not a choice, he said softly. It was a reflex, like breathing. I could not watch the light go out of your eyes. Taya leaned forward. The space between them vanished. She could smell the sage on his skin and the faint, metallic scent of the battle that still clung to him. She lowered her head until her forehead rested against his. You saved me, she breathed. You saved us all, he countered. She turned her face slightly, and their lips met. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the canyon. It was slow, deep, and filled with a terrifying tenderness. It was a kiss of acknowledgement, a silent vow made in the quiet dark. There was no urgency to tear at clothes or seek oblivion. There was only the profound relief of two survivors finding anchor in one another. He stroked her hair, his fingers tangling in the golden strands. Taya closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. In the arms of this Comanche warrior, inside a lodge made of buffalo hide. She felt more cherished, more seen than she ever had in the velvet-lined parlors of her father's house. But the world outside the lodge did not stop turning simply because two people had found peace. News arrived from the settlement a week later. It came in the form of a weary-looking Dr. Stanton, who rode into camp under a flag of truce, accompanied by a nervous Reverend Thomas. They sat in the council circle, the mood somber. Nokoni, able to sit up now but still weak, leaned against a backrest of willow branches. Taya sat beside him, ignoring the surprised glances of the doctor. Major Briggs is in irons, Dr. Stanton reported, taking a sip of water. We took him to Fort Concho. The colonel was displeased when he read the affidavit signed by myself, the Reverend, and the soldiers. He had Briggs stripped of his command immediately. He will be sent to St. Louis for a court-martial. Then it is over, Red Hawk said, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. No, Stanton said heavily. It is not over. Briggs is gone, but his shadow remains. The town, Concho Valley, is divided. Taya felt a chill. What do you mean? Half the town believes the truth, the doctor explained, looking at Taya with pity. They are horrified by the arson and the attempted murder, but the other half, the ranchers who lost cattle, the men who drink in the saloon, they see Briggs as a martyr. They say he was framed. They say he was a hero trying to protect civilization from savages. He hesitated, then looked directly at Taya. And they say he was brought down by a woman who betrayed her own blood to lay with a Comanche. Taya stiffened, her chin lifting. Let them talk. Words do not bleed. It is more than talk. Taya, Reverend Thomas added gently, there are threats. The shopkeepers say they will not serve anyone from the Cooper Ranch. The Ladies' Guild has struck your name from the registry. To them, you are not a heroine. You are fallen, irredeemable. Nokoni's hand tightened on the arm of his backrest. His eyes went cold. They hate her because she showed them their own ugliness in a mirror. Perhaps, Stanton said. But hatred is a powerful fuel, and there is something else. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a rolled map. The Railroad Commission. They are not stopping. The survey team will be here in 1 month. And the Army has ordered a new regiment to the fort to ensure the safety of the workers. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Briggs was gone. But the machine he represented, the relentless march of steel and steam, was unstoppable. They will not let you stay in this valley, Stanton said softly to Nokoni. The colonel is a fair man, but he has his orders. If you remain here, near the tracks, there will be conflict. And next time, it will not be 20 men. It will be 500. Nokoni looked at the map, then at the canyon walls that had sheltered his people for generations. He saw the inevitable. He had won the battle for his life, but he had lost the war for his land. We cannot fight the Iron Horse, the elders said, his voice trembling. It eats the earth. We have a proposal, Reverend Thomas said. An informal agreement. If you move your band west, beyond the Pecos River, into the high country, the army will agree not to pursue. They will turn a blind eye. You can live free, but you cannot live here. It was a bitter pill. To leave the graves of their ancestors, to leave the sweet water of the Concho, to be pushed further into the harsh, dry wasteland. Nokoni looked at Taya. He saw the pain in her eyes. She knew what this meant. "We will consider your words," Nokoni said formally. That afternoon, a lone rider approached the camp. He did not carry a flag of truce, nor a weapon. He rode slumped in the saddle, a man defeated by his own choices. It was Elias Cooper. Taya was grinding corn when she saw him. She froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had not seen her father since the night she climbed out the window into the storm. He dismounted stiffly. He looked 10 years older. His coat hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He stood at the edge of the camp, unsure if he was allowed to enter, looking like a ghost haunting the living. Taya wiped her hands on her apron and walked out to meet him. She did not run, she did not cry. She walked with the steady, grounded gait of a woman who knew the earth beneath her feet. "Taya," Elias whispered when she stopped 5 feet from him. He looked at her buckskin dress, her braided hair, the knife she wore at her belt. He flinched, as if seeing a stranger. "Father," she said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the anger she had carried for weeks. The doctor told me you were here," Elias stammered. "I brought the carriage. It is waiting down the trail. I can take you home." "Home," Taya repeated the word, testing its weight. "To the ranch, to the house where you agreed to sell me to a murderer." Elias crumbled. He dropped to his knees in the dust, covering his face with his hands. "I was afraid. Taya, the debt, the threats." Briggs made it sound so simple. "He said it was for your safety." I wanted to believe him. I was weak. It was the first time she had ever heard her father admit to weakness. He had always been the patriarch, the unshakable stone. To see him kneeling, broken by guilt, tore at her heart, but it did not mend the rift. "I know you were afraid," Taya said, stepping closer but not touching him. "But you chose your fear over me. You let him name a price for my life." "I know," Elias sobbed. "God help me, I know, but it is over now. Briggs is gone. We can start over. The town. We will face them together. I will make them respect you again. Please, daughter, come home. The house is so quiet." Taya looked past him, toward the eastern horizon where the ranch lay. She thought of her room with the lace curtains. She thought of the piano she used to play. It felt like a memory from another lifetime, belonging to a girl who had died in the river. "I cannot go back, Father," she said gently. "The girl you are looking for is not here." She drowned in the Concho the day she realized her father loved his land more than his child. Elias looked up, his face streaked with tears. "Don't say that. I love you." "I know you do, in your way," Taya said. "But I have found a new way to live. A way where I am not a bargaining chip, where I am not property." She pointed to the lodge where Nokoni lay. "There is a man in there who took a bullet for me. He did not ask for a dowry. He did not ask for a railroad contract. He just gave his blood to keep mine inside me. That is the only family I recognize today." Elias stood up slowly, swaying like a drunkard. He looked at the lodge, then back at his daughter. He saw the steel in her spine, steel he had helped forge, but could no longer command. "If you stay with them," Elias warned, his voice shaking, "you choose a hard road. They have no future. Taya, they are walking into the sunset. You will be hunted. You will be hungry." "Then I will be hungry," Taya said. "But I will be free." Elias stared at her for a long moment, etching her face into his memory. Then he nodded, a gesture of final defeat. "The door is unlocked," he said, his voice breaking. "If you ever change your mind, the door is unlocked." He turned and mounted his horse. He did not look back. Taya watched him ride away until he was just a speck of dust against the vast, indifferent sky. She did not weep. She felt lighter, as if a heavy chain had finally been struck from her ankle. The decision was made that evening, the Council of Elders. Nokoni and Taya sat around the fire. "The soldiers give us 2 days," Red Hawk said, spitting into the flames. "Then they come to escort us out. We will not be escorted," Nokoni said, his voice gaining strength. "We leave tomorrow at dawn. We go to the high country, to the sacred peaks." It was a funeral dirge for their life in the valley. The women began to pack the lodges, weeping softly as they rolled up the hides that had sheltered them for years. They buried the heavy grinding stones they could not carry, hiding them in the earth in the vain hope that one day they might return. It reminded Taya of the stories of the great fires, of ranchers watching their barns burn, knowing that everything they had built was turning to ash. This was a burning too, but a silent one. A culture was being uprooted, severed from the land that gave it meaning. Late that night, Nokoni walked Taya to the edge of the river. The moon was a sliver of silver bone in the sky. He walked with a limp, leaning heavily on a spear shaft he used as a cane. "You should go," Nokoni said suddenly. Taya stopped. She looked at him. "Go where?" "After your father," he said, staring at the dark water. "The doctor is right. The reverend is right. Our time here is done. We are walking into a long winter. Taya, there will be snow. There will be soldiers. There will be no soft beds, no music, no safety." He turned to face her, his eyes intense and pained. "You have a world out there. You are clever. You are brave. You could be a doctor. You could be a teacher. You could go to St. Louis and marry a man who does not have a price on his head." He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with agonizing gentleness. "I cannot ask you to walk into the dark with me. It is selfish. I am a sinking ship. Taya, do not lash yourself to the mast." It was a noble thing to do. He was trying to push her away to save her. He was trying to be the hero who sacrifices his heart to ensure her survival. Taya felt a flash of anger, hot, righteous, and purifying. "You think you can decide for me?" she asked, her voice rising. "Just like Briggs, just like my father. You think you know what is best for the little white girl." "I think you deserve a life that is not a constant battle," Nokoni argued. "I tried that life," Taya snapped. "I tried to live a life of safety. It was a lie. It was a cage wrapped in silk. You think I am afraid of the cold. You think I am afraid of hunger." She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her, forcing him to see the woman who had shot a regulator to save him. "You told me once that I would catch a terrible cold if you let go," she said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "Well, look at me. Nokoni, I am already cold. I am frozen out of that town. I am ruined in their eyes. They call me a traitor. They call me a whore." Nokoni flinched at the word, his jaw tightening. "So do not talk to me about saving my reputation," Taya continued, her eyes blazing with tears she refused to shed. "My reputation is dead. I buried it in the canyon, and I would rather be ruined with you starving, hunted and freezing than be safe in a house where I have to lie about who I am." She grabbed his hand and pressed it against her heart. "You are not a sinking ship. You are the only thing that keeps me afloat. If you leave me behind, Nokoni, then you really kill me." It was her ultimatum, her declaration. "Let me be ruined with you." It was a rejection of the comfortable lie in favor of the dangerous truth. Nokoni looked at her, and his resistance crumbled. He saw that she was not a fragile thing to be protected, but a partner to be reckoned with. He saw that sending her back would be a cruelty greater than any winter storm. "Then we walked together," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "It will be hard," he warned against her skin. "I know," Taya replied, holding him just as tight, "but it will be ours." They stood there by the river, two outcasts in a land that no longer wanted them, forging a covenant of blood and breath. The falling action had stripped away the last of their illusions. All that was left was the road ahead, winding up into the mountains, into the unknown, and into the freedom they had paid for with everything they had. The dawn did not break over the Concho Valley with a fanfare of gold and crimson. Rather, It bled into the sky in soft shades of bruised lavender and steel gray. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering smoke of fires that had been deliberately extinguished. It was the smell of an ending. In the Comanche camp, there was no chaotic scramble. The movement was fluid, practiced, and somber. Lodges that had stood for seasons were dismantled in minutes. The buffalo hides rolled tight and lashed to the travois poles dragged by the sturdy ponies. Children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, moved with a quiet discipline, carrying bundles of dried meat and water skins. The elderly sat on their horses, their face turned toward the rising sun, chanting a low, rhythmic song that sounded like the wind moving through the canyon. It was a song of farewell to the spirits of the river and the stone. Taya Cooper stood by her mare, Bess. She looked nothing like the girl who had ridden out to sketch warriors in a sketchbook weeks ago. Gone were the petticoats and the constrictive lace of the settlements. She wore a tunic of soft buckskin that fell to her knees, leggings that protected her from the brush, and moccasins that allowed her to feel the heartbeat of the ground. Her golden hair was braided back, practical and severe, though a few loose strands framed a face that had been hardened by sun and sorrow. She checked the cinch on her saddle, her hands moving with efficient grace. She carried little a bedroll, a canteen, her sketchbook wrapped in oilcloth, and the heavy revolver at her hip. She was leaving behind a world of porcelain teacups and piano lessons for a world of sky and stone. Nokoni rode up beside her. He sat his paint horse with a stiffness that betrayed the healing wound in his side, but his back was straight. He wore a simple shirt, and his eyes scanned the horizon, already calculating the miles they had to cover before the sun reached its zenith. "The trail will be dusty," Nokoni said, his voice low, "and the water will be scarce until we reach the high crevices." "I am not thirsty," Taya replied, swinging into the saddle. She looked at him, and for a moment, the weight of their departure lifted. They were together. That was the only geography that mattered. A solitary figure rode out from the tree line to meet them. It was Elias Cooper. The rancher stopped his horse 10 yards away. He looked at the line of Comanche families moving slowly toward the western pass. Then he looked at his daughter. He took in her attire, the weapon at her belt, and the man riding beside her. The silence stretched between them, filled with the things that could never be unsaid. Taya saw the lines of grief etched deep into her father's face. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by his compromise with a man like Briggs. "You are truly going," Elias said. It was not a question. "I am," Taya answered. Her voice was steady, lacking the tremor of their last encounter. "This valley is too small for the truth. Father." Elias looked down at his hands. Calloused from years of working a land, he was now terrified of losing to the very progress he had courted. "I wanted to give you a kingdom. Taya, I thought I was building it for you." "You were building a cage," Taya said gently. "But I forgive you for wanting me to be safe. Do not worry about me. I have found my own kingdom. It just has no fences." Elias nodded slowly. He looked at Nokoni. There was no hatred in the rancher's eyes anymore, only a weary resignation and a begrudging respect for the man who had bled to save his child when he himself had failed. "Keep her safe," Elias told the warrior. "She keeps herself safe," Nokoni replied. "I just ride beside her." Elias swallowed hard, fighting back tears that a man of his generation was not supposed to shed. He looked at Taya one last time, memorizing the set of her jaw and the light in her eyes. "If the winter is too hard," Elias choked out, his voice cracking. "If the mountains are too cold, the door is unlocked. It will always be unlocked." It was a peace offering. It was an admission that even if she was leaving his world, she would never leave his heart. "Goodbye, Father," Taya whispered. Elias turned his horse and rode back toward the ranch that felt empty now, leaving his daughter to the wild. On a ridge overlooking the valley, 2 other men watched the exodus. Dr. Stanton sat on a roan gelding, his medical bag strapped to the saddle. Beside him, Reverend Thomas held his Bible, the leather cover worn smooth. "They are leaving," the Reverend murmured, An entire people, vanishing into the dust. They are surviving, Dr. Stanton corrected, adjusting his spectacles, which is more than Major Briggs will do in St. Louis. The doctor patted the pocket of his coat, where a copy of the signed affidavit rested. I sent the wire to the governor this morning. The story of the Comanche raid is dead. The story of Harlan Briggs, the arsonist and murderer, is already traveling down the telegraph lines. The town is quiet today, Reverend Thomas observed. But I heard Mrs. Miller talking in the mercantile. She was telling her son that the Indians did not burn their barn. She told him that a man with a badge did it. Stanton nodded. It is a start, Reverend, just a whisper. But avalanches begin with a single pebble. They watched as the end of the Comanche column disappeared into the cut of the hills. And the girl, the Reverend asked, do you think she will make it? Taya Cooper Stanton smiled, a genuine expression of admiration. Reverend, that girl walked through fire and flood and came out holding the hand of a warrior. I do not worry about her making it. I worry about the world trying to keep up with her. The society of Concho Valley would not change overnight. Prejudice ran deep, like the roots of the mesquite, but the cracks were there. A seed of doubt had been planted in the minds of the ranchers. A woman had chosen the savage over the civilized officer, and in doing so, she had forced them to question which was which. The journey was arduous. The land rose steadily, trading the rolling plains for the sharp, jagged teeth of the Guadalupe Mountains. The sun beat down with relentless intensity, and the wind carried the grit of the desert. Taya rode near the rear of the column, helping to herd the spare horses. She watched the families ahead of her. They had lost their home, their hunting grounds, and their peace. They were walking into an uncertain future where hunger would be a constant companion. Yet, she heard no wailing. She heard mothers singing to their babies. She heard men joking about the mule that refused to walk in a straight line. They were a people of immense resilience, and she was humbled to be among them. Late in the afternoon, Nokoni dropped back to ride beside her. He offered her his canteen. The water is warm, he apologized. It is wet, Taya said, drinking gratefully. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Where will we stop? There is a spring in the foothills, Nokoni said, pointing to a distant purple ridge. We will build a new village there. It is hidden. The soldiers do not like the steep trails. It will be hard to grow corn there, Taya observed, looking at the rocky terrain. We will hunt, Nokoni said, and we will trade, but we will have to change. The old ways are dying. Taya, the buffalo are few. He looked at the children riding on the travois. We must give them weapons that are not bows. We must give them words. Words. You will teach them, Nokoni said, looking at her. You will teach them the white man's marks on paper. You will teach them the laws that Briggs used against us. If they know the enemy's tongue, they cannot be tricked by his treaties. Taya felt a surge of purpose. She touched the oilcloth-wrapped book in her saddlebag. I will teach them, and I will write it all down. Nokoni, not just the treaties. I will write about the Miller barn. I will write about the canyon. I will write about you. Why? He asked. History is written by the men with the biggest guns. Not this time, Taya said firmly. This time, history will be written by the woman who saw it happen. I will not let them turn you into a monster in the school books. I will make sure the world knows that while Briggs wanted a railroad, you wanted a future. Nokoni smiled, a rare, open expression that softened the harsh angles of his face. Then write, little rancher. Write until your fingers bleed. Night fell over the high desert, bringing with it a sudden, biting chill. The camp was small, temporary. Fires flickered like fallen stars against the vast darkness of the wilderness. Taya and Nokoni sat away from the main circle, wrapped in a heavy buffalo robe. The silence was absolute, save for the crackle of the mesquite wood and the distant hoot of an owl. Nokoni watched the flames, his profile etched in amber light. He looked at the woman beside him. Her face was smudged with dust. Her hands were rough, and she looked more beautiful to him than the first sunrise of spring. You gave up everything, Nokoni said softly. Your father, your home, your name. I gave up nothing that was real. Taya replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. I traded a shadow for a substance. You could be sleeping in a feather bed tonight, he pressed, a lingering trace of guilt in his voice. Instead, you sleep on hard ground. I sleep beside a man who knows who he is. Taya said, That is softer than any feather. Nokoni turned to her. His dark eyes searched hers. Do you have regrets truly? Taya looked up at the Milky Way. A river of diamond dust spilled across the sky. She thought of the piano. She thought of the Sunday dresses. Then she thought of Briggs's cold eyes and the suffocating feeling of the corset. She looked back at Nokoni. She traced the line of his jaw with her finger. I have one fear, she whispered, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. What is it? Nokoni asked, his brow furrowing with concern. The soldier's hunger. No, Taya said, her eyes dancing with the memory of the rainstorm by the river. I am afraid I might catch a terrible cold if you ever decide to let go of me again. Nokoni laughed. It was a deep, rich sound that rumbled in his chest, startling a sleeping dog nearby. The tension of the leadership, the weight of the survival, momentarily dissolved in the warmth of her humor. Then I am warned, the Comanche said, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. He pulled the robe tighter around them, enclosing them in a private world. I will not let go, not for all the ponies in Texas. He lowered his head, and she met him halfway. The kiss was slow, tasting of wood smoke and promise. It was not the frantic passion of the battlefield, nor the tentative exploration of the sickbed. It was the confident, enduring intimacy of two people who had walked through hell and decided to build a heaven on the other side. As the fire burned down to glowing coals, they lay back against the saddle blankets, looking up at the stars. Nokoni's arm was a heavy, comforting weight across her, and Taya knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. The themes of their story had woven themselves into a tapestry that would outlast the cloth of their clothes. Love and freedom were no longer abstract concepts preached from a pulpit. They were the dirt under their fingernails and the miles under their boots. They had learned that freedom was not the absence of walls, but the presence of choice. Taya had chosen the hard road, and in doing so, she had liberated herself from the expectations that sought to suffocate her. Justice had been served, not by the hangman's noose, but by the truth. It was imperfect. Briggs might escape the ultimate punishment, and the railroad would still come, but they had stripped him of his honor. They had denied him his narrative. They had ensured that the memory of the valley would not be one of savage aggression, but of dignified resistance. And dignity, human dignity, was the final victory. Taya Cooper, the virgin of the ranch, had redefined her worth. She was not a vessel to be kept pure for a husband's transaction. She was a woman who fought, who spoke, and who loved with a ferocity that shook the foundations of her society. She had proven that a woman's honor was not located in her body, but in her spirit. The final image was one of motion. Days later, the band crested the final ridge that separated the plains from the high sanctuary of the mountains. The sun was at their backs, casting long shadows that stretched out ahead of them like fingers reaching for the future. A sudden gust of wind swept up the slope, carrying the scent of pine and snow. It whipped Taya's hair across her face. She laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. She looked at Nokoni. He gave a sharp cry. Raising his hand to the sky, he kicked his paint horse into a gallop. Taya spurred Bess. The two horses leaped forward, racing side by side along the spine of the world. Dust rose behind them like smoke, obscuring the valley they had left behind. They rode not as a warrior and a captive, not as a red man and a white woman, but as equals. They rode toward the hard winter, toward the hunger, toward the battles that were yet to be fought, but as the wind tore at their clothes and the ground thundered beneath them, Taya Cooper did not shiver. She smiled, because she knew that no matter how cold the wind blew, she would never be cold again. Her hand was held, and her road was chosen. They vanished over the rise, two free spirits claiming the horizon, leaving nothing behind but the legend of the Comanche and the rancher's daughter who dared to rewrite the West. Thank you so much for listening to this story of Taya and Noconi. It has been a long journey from the ranch house to the high mountains, and I am grateful you rode along with us. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in a busy city or out in the quiet country like our characters? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. Did Taya make the right choice? If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to my channel, Wild West Tales. It helps us bring more of these stories to life. Don't forget to like the video and hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your eyes on the horizon.